Welcome to Stories with Traction, unedited and unfiltered. These are real conversations with leaders who have walked through trials and triumph. In a world of AI-polished sound bites and scripted perfection, this podcast isn't about being flawless. It's about being purposeful. I'm your host, Matt Zahn. We're going to find out what drives these leaders, what's their story, and how can we learn from their experiences. Get inspired and enjoy Stories with Traction. Jason, welcome to Stories with Traction podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I'm really interested to dive into what you do. I think you're going to offer a tremendous amount of value to my audience. Before we get into the CRM and email and sales process, my first question I have for you is when you're at a networking event or a party and someone asks you, Jason, what do you do? What's your response to that question?
Oh, that's a great question. It's the question that my 13-year-old daughter always asks me, and she's still confused. So what I do is I tell people, depending upon the scenario, I tell people that I help improve their sales processes so that they could focus on selling more and less of the busy work that's distracting them from selling. And then I do this by putting together all of their cycle, right? From the moment they get a lead to the close they lead, I track all that for them to make their job even easier to sell.
That's awesome. And I had mentioned to you prior to hopping on this episode that I work with a lot of leaders, a lot of business leaders, and they are intensely focused on sales. Now, sometimes not the right things or the most productive or efficient things, which I'm sure that you can help us with. But I am curious with how fast the world is changing, especially with new technologies. Do you think AI is helping with the sales process, or do you think it's a hindrance and it's becoming even more challenging for, like, let's say, a sales rep to break through that noise?
So, yeah, it's a topic obviously that everybody is talking about. And my answer is this. If you're using the AI strategically, I think it's amazing. It's actually helped me save deals, Matt. I've used AI where I've been close to closing a deal and there's an objection and I'm trying to figure out how to tackle that. I've used all my transcribed notes, right, from all my conversations with that potential client, put it into the AI model and said, how do I save this deal, right? Here's all the objections. Here's what we've talked about. And every time I've used that, I've used it 3 times. Within that same day, I've gotten an email. Okay, let's go forward. I feel comfortable. I don't think that could have been done with me, as smart as I am, right, to understand those objections from a psychological perspective. And so AI definitely has its place. Now, also on the opposite side of that, it's also overly being used, right? Let's even look at LinkedIn. Even LinkedIn uses a little bit of AI with tools connected to it. There's a ton of automation going on LinkedIn. You and I get hammered every day with tons of in-mail requests and all the solicitation, even email marketing. So AI is only going to make that worse, I think, because it's going to be that much easier to blanket out all of this kind of crap, if you will, that isn't intended for the right audience with the right message.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, everyone listening would probably agree AI is a huge double-edged sword in our society right now, just like social media was a double-edged sword, right? There's many positive advantages to social media, and there's some major detriments that we're just learning now with mental health and
Sure.
all kinds of different things. And there's going to be more and more that's going to come out with AI for positive and for things that are incredibly challenging. So I appreciate you sharing that. I do want to jump to the CRM piece because I feel like there is a lot of misconceptions regarding CRMs. So let's start with a definition. And I feel there's a lot of people that we think in pictures, right? So like we say a word and a picture comes to people's mind. So when I say CRM to you, what's your definition and what's the picture you have, Jason, of what a CRM is?
So to me, the picture is three separate pictures that all are living together in one canvas. And so the first picture is your database, right? All of your customers, all of your prospective customers, all of your vendors, right? All of your contacts segmented in a way that's easily sortable. So that's one element of a CRM. It's got to have all your information in one place. It can't be living in different silos. The second piece is it has to have all of your sales activities, right? So your pipeline, what do you have in terms of proposals that are being sent out? What's your win rate? What's your close rate? Everything going on in the sales cycle needs to live in the CRM. And the third piece that I feel very strongly about is communication. And what I mean by that is email communication, but also a place to track notes and to have conversations stored. Because if you don't have those three things together, you can't really fully paint a picture of what's happening from start to finish through the sales cycle.
That's a great definition. I appreciate you setting the tone for us with what a CRM is. So I want to throw out this analogy because I think it'll be helpful from a picture perspective for people
Mm-hmm.
to visualize this. So right now, I have really upped the ante as it pertains to my fitness goals, especially with weight bearing exercises, me going into a gym and lifting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've lifted for years and I've had multiple gym memberships over the years. Just because I had a gym membership didn't necessarily mean that I was going. So first you got to get the membership and then you have to go. And then I learned that I've been lifting wrong for years. So
Mm-hmm.
I reached out to a personal trainer in the last 5 weeks and I started going and having these personal training sessions. And I was shocked and almost horrified in a sense that I did not have proper form. It was actually messing up my lower back and my left hip. That's why I was experiencing
Mm-hmm.
a considerable amount of pain. I wasn't using proper form. I wasn't doing the right exercises. I went in with the goals that I had for this trainer. I sat down with him and I said, "Here are my goals. Here are my needs." And then I backed it with the wants that I had, meaning the wants that I had for my actual
Mm-hmm.
routine that I wanted. And I kid you not, he looked at me and he said, "You are at least 6 months away from doing those exercises. You are in no way, shape, or form ready to do those exercises. You told me what you need, and what you want and what you need, they're not connecting right now because what you need to do is X, Y, and Z in order to get the health benefits that I truly need it." So I bring that up because there's so many businesses that they'll say, "We have a CRM. We're good to go. We have a CRM." That's like someone getting a gym membership, right? Well, I got a
Mm-hmm.
gym membership. And then there are people that they're using, or companies that are using the CRM, but they're not using it properly. So, with that analogy that I just shared with you, I want you to talk about certain processes. I want you to talk about potential failure rates.
Yep.
Again, just like people getting a gym membership, high failure rate with people not going consistently, falling off. So, what's a good process? And where is like a success failure rate with how companies actually set this up for growth and actually for the advancement they need with sales?
First of all, love the analogy, Matt. And I've been there myself, right? And talking about AI, I use AI now to help with my routine, which is amazing because I could, anyway, that's another conversation for another day. So it's all about process, right? And just with your example of the gym membership, if you don't have a process, a CRM is not going to do anything for you. And what I mean by that is knock, knock, right? Someone's at your door, the phone rings, the website someone fills out a form on the website. What happens? How do you respond? How quickly do you respond? Who's responsible for responding? Once you have that first part of the process, what's the next part, right? Who's talking to this person? Is it a video meeting? Is it a phone call? Is it a meeting in person? What's the third step? Is it a proposal? Is it a demo? And so if you don't have these processes defined, you can't expect the CRM to make that more proficient, right? And also be able to track the process. And what we find is a lot of businesses, and we're talking about the businesses that are, 3 million, $10 million in revenue that sometimes don't even have this process. And they've gotten there by a little bit of sheer luck, being in the right place at the right time, but also just through brute force, right? They're determined to make it work and they're not being efficient with their time. And so when you have a process, like your example, you're going to get the results you're looking for, right? So you could be going to the gym for the next 3 years and still not see your results. But now working with the trainer in 6 months, you'll start seeing results. And so what we often talk about with our clients is get a piece of paper and start writing down what you think your process is. And however you want to do that, you want to sketch it out, you want to do it online, it doesn't matter, but start building out what that process is. And not only the process for your sales process, what about onboarding? How do you onboard a new customer? What does that process look like? How do you support existing customers, customer service? All these things are related, right? To making sure that everything is running in a efficient way. Now, the one thing that we often see when a process is not in place, Matt, and this is an alarming sort of like fact here, is the manual work and the administration work that's done to clean up all of this messy data. And so let's use a quick example, and I'll throw one at you. So let's say you have a company, your best salesperson is making 150K a year. Let's say they're spending 2 hours a day on that administrative cleanup and that busy work because things aren't organized and there is no process, you're ultimately paying them almost $40,000 a year to do data entry work and not be selling, right? That's a lot of money, right? For them to be doing something they shouldn't have to be doing. And so process isn't just making things efficient, it's also a way to increase revenue and to make your team earn more for you, especially if you have a sales team. So we won't get started without defining the process. Clients are like ready to jump in, like, let's get the CRM going. And I'm like, whoa, we got to wait a minute. The best CRM in the world, it could be Salesforce, it could be HubSpot, it could be any platform. It doesn't matter. Without a process, it's going to sit there and collect dust. It's just not going to deliver what you're expecting.
Yeah, so many people talk about ROI and what you just said about potentially losing $40,000 that could be allocated somewhere else because of data entry. Like there's so many different ways that a company can invest like not even close to the amount of money through different AI tools, through
Mhm.
all other channels from a data entry. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. That's absolutely fascinating to me. I do want to talk about an emotional piece for a moment because we're talking about processes, and maybe you can throw a statistic or two if you have it out. But
Sure.
I am curious because I feel like we live in a world that's pretty impulsive.
Hmm.
And if it's, you could say B2C, you could say B2B, like we are very impulsive people. And even though logic should be guiding our decision making ability, emotion happens all the time. Like we make decisions based on emotion a lot. So something happens, right? Someone will see something, maybe it's something regarding a marketing campaign, or maybe they even realize they're being marketed to, but it's like it's really flashy, it's really exciting. I need this. So then they reach out for a demo or something. I'm trying to wrap my brain around the process behind this because if they were initially excited about that, would they even really need a follow-up or not?
Great question. So the answer is absolutely yes. But before I address that, I want to talk about the shiny object syndrome you just talked about, especially with AI and just with how fast in the last 15, 20 years software has exploded, right? Across everything, not just even personal things, right? Apps for your health, for your life, for entertainment, whatever it might be. It's so accessible and easy, right? We all walking around with our phone, right? We could download any app we want, instantaneously. But again, people are gravitating because they saw that ad, because their best friend is the CEO at some companies like, hey, this software is amazing. You got to use it. What the friend doesn't know is that it took them a year to build that out, right? And that it wasn't just flipping a switch and it worked. So then they buy it and they're like, well, this thing is terrible. It's not doing what it's doing for you. Why not? Right. And so what we tell people is don't shop for software and don't get caught in the trap. And listen, believe me, I'm a tech guy. I love it, right? Like I download stuff all the time to kind of try it out. But the freemium model is how they get you because now you're downloading something for free or maybe at a very low cost, but you're doing it because of the features that it offers, but you haven't identified what the problem is you're trying to solve, right? So you're gravitated towards like, oh, this is cool, but do I really need this tool to help me build videos when I don't even use video in my marketing, right? And then you're just playing around with something and wasting time, and it's not part of your overall strategy. So I always tell people before you do any type of demo with any type of business software, have a full list of questions. Who on the team is going to use this piece of software? Why are they going to use it? What problem does it solve? If you don't have those questions ahead of time, then you're just buying something for the features and the benefits. Um, and the second part of that is why follow up after the demo? We live in a competitive world, Matt. I mean, you and I both know that. So does the audience listening. If I'm talking to you and looking at your demo, I'm probably looking at least at 5 or 6 other demos of another competitor. And so if there's no follow up, what's going to happen is the person that I last either talked to or that's been educating me the most is the person I'm going to buy from. Even if it's maybe not the best solution, it's like they've expressed their level of expertise and I'm comfortable with them. And I just had that happen with a client recently. He's like, and that took about 3 or 4 months to close, which is a little bit longer for us. We usually close a little bit quicker. But this guy was doing deep research And he's like, every time I kept on coming back to you because all these other companies, I would throw questions and they would give me unsubstantiated answers, or they would give me answers that I fact checked and were not true. And so he's like, I just felt like you were the real deal. And now if I would have just said, if I wouldn't have answered any of those questions or just said, hey, just call me when you're ready, I would have never gotten that piece of business.
This is going to be tough to answer from a numbers perspective, like throwing a
I'll
stat
try.
at it. Maybe you can, right? Because it's just a hypothetical situation. Let's
Yeah.
imagine someone's at a networking event. So at this networking event, people are introducing themselves, and someone stands up. They're in a room full of people. Someone stands up and they share maybe a service that is high value, but they've never really thought of engaging with before, right? So in that spur of the moment, this idea comes in their brain, like I should really do this. I should reach out to this person. They get excited about it to speak back to our point of emotion, right? So there's an element of excitement, like I need this. At the end of the event, they whether get a business card or they link up with this person on LinkedIn and they tell the person, I'm really interested in this. We should have a conversation. That individual, is there a certain time frame that they should follow up? And if so, what would that be? And where would it fall off where it's like way too long? Meaning like within a week they should follow up. And if they wait a month, like that person has like a 99% chance of not purchasing that service. Or are there any kind of like stat that you could throw out or any guidance on what quick follow-up actually means?
Yeah. So this is not industry specific, but the studies show that if you don't follow up within 15 minutes of getting a lead or somebody knocking on your door, physically, virtually, whatever, that they're interested, they're already shopping around and looking at other people. So 15 minutes is the magic number. Now, is that realistic in every business? No. How do you circumvent that? You have autoresponders, right? Someone fills out a form on the website. Right away, they get an email. Thank you so much for getting in touch with us. We'll get back to you by the end of the day, right? Or we'll get back to you by tomorrow. So at least there's some form of communication. A lot of businesses don't even have that, right? And then you're just waiting for days and you're like, well, is anybody even going to get back to me? um, I think on a personal level, right? If you're meeting somebody face to face and they reach out expressing interest to talk, I think the same day you should respond, personally. Um, and just say, hey, let's have a conversation. Now, how do you respond? Right. So for me, I'm a problem solver. I don't look at myself as a software seller, if you will. I'm here to solve problems. Software is just a byproduct of how I help solve the problem. And so when I talk to people, the first thing I'm asking them is to try to whittle in on what are the pain points? Like what prompted this person at the networking event to be like, oh, I should talk to John. Like John, what John's talking about resonates with me. Why? Like what's going on in your life or with your business that what John said has hit something, whether at an emotional level or any other level. And that's where, to me, like the real magic happens in trying to build a relationship. Because if you're not solving a problem, all you're doing is selling something to somebody either on an emotional level or some other reason that they may not even need what you're selling. And there's not going to be any like longevity with that type of relationship from my experience.
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
That is wild. Now, I know you said, I guess different industries would be different, but I'm sure you just challenged a lot of people listening because a lot of people think, 24 hours or within a week is quick follow-up. So I think you've just challenged everyone to try to figure out, is there any kind of automated tool that someone can get a message almost immediately? Is there a way that they can, follow up quicker? So I really appreciate you mentioning
So
that.
let me just add something to Matt. You own a house?
I do.
Okay. So I'm sure you've had to have work done in the house, right? Need a contractor.
Absolutely.
Okay. We all have. How frustrating it is calling people and not getting calls back for days or ever. Now, the contractor that calls you back in 15 minutes, don't you think you're more likely to hire them and to at least have them come in? And aren't they more poised to be able to get that business when probably every other contractor you called hasn't either returned your call or will not call you back for a number of days? It's just a matter of comfort. Like, okay, this person is putting me there. I'm important to this person. And that's really where it starts with the neuroscience of starting that relationship. When I call people back in 15 minutes, they're like, oh my God, I didn't expect the call back so quickly. you know, and they're like, I would have been fine waiting a day or two, but like, I'm like, well, that's not how I operate. Like you had a question, I'm calling you back, right? I'm reaching out to you. Um, and I even do that within business. I tell our team, I said, if a client emails, you get back to them before the end of the day. Like you have to respond to everybody. You can't wait until the next day because that's just not, to me, I don't want to be treated that way, on the other end of it.
Yeah, you bring up an example that I'm already feeling it because real life example. A couple weeks ago, I had a gentleman come out to my house to fix my heating system and replace the motor. And then as the motor was being replaced, there was a pipe that was out of alignment and it was leaking. So I immediately texted this individual, "Hey, my
Mhm.
pipe's leaking." No response. Then the next day I called, like, "Hey, can you please come back out because this pipe's leaking?" Called multiple times, texted multiple times, no response. Now, here's the crazy thing. For this individual to come out and fix this leak, I mean, maybe I would pay him, what, a couple $100 to
Mhm.
come out for a service call. Or maybe he would admit that the reason why the pipe's leaking is because the motor was put
Right.
in,
Something he
in
did. Yeah.
something that
Right.
he did, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a couple $100 to this gentleman because when he was leaving my house, I literally said to him, "How much would it cost to just replace the entire system?"
Hmm.
And threw out a number. So
Hmm.
I would think that that would be highly desirable for someone to come out and replace an entire system, like very profitable. So now I'm starting to think like, should I even reach out to this company ever again to come out and do anything? There could be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars lost. So you're right, like communication, especially with speed, is really, really important. So you bring up a real example. I'm already starting to
Yeah.
feel a little bit of pain because I was really frustrated. So I got to go
I
to
can
someone
almost
else.
guarantee that guy's out of the running, right? Even just by you talking about it. So, I mean, imagine all the people that are listening that are in sales, right? And how many deals you've lost because you haven't gone back and you're like, oh, like I could wait or, you know, and, and if you're that busy, God bless you, that's great. But then have a system, right? We talk about processes. Who's your assistant? What's the software that you're using to help follow up with those things you can't manually follow up with?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can't agree more. Question for you on maybe too much follow up, right? I think there's a lot of people that are in sales that they are concerned about being labeled as annoying because of the sheer volume of follow-up. So is there any
Hmm.
kind of best practices you could point to? And I know like there's different industries, it's a little bit different, depends on multiple different
Sure.
different things as far as product service, as far as the buyer's journey for the person. But what's a good rule of thumb? Is it three times? Is it five times? What would you say regarding just the sheer volume of follow-up when someone indicates that they are interested?
So the ultimate question that I always ask, right, is how long does it take to normally sell a client, right? Does it take 3 months? Does it take 6 months? Does it take 5 minutes? We need to understand that first. Sometimes businesses or salespeople don't know how long it takes. So we have to start looking at some of the old data they have, even if there's not a CRM in place. When did you start the conversation? When did you close the deal? When did they sign the contract? And we start trying to bridge that gap. If your process is 3 months, following up every week for 3 months, that's too much follow up, right? If your process is like 9 months, following up, like every month, like that's pretty good, right? Because you're sort of just touching base. Now, this is the thing of it, is that studies show that prospects who are nurtured. Okay. When I talk about nurtured, they are not being sent an email. Are you ready to sign? Are you ready to sign? Like, like who else do I need to talk to? They're not being pressured. They're being educated, right? This is what I was talking about earlier before, Matt. They're saying, whether or not we work together, here's some things that I'm going to offer you to help you, right? So, if it is, let's say that the heating person, he could have you on a campaign knowing you're looking to replace the whole system, educating you about this is what's involved. These are the different manufacturers we've worked with. These are the pros and cons of replacing it. This is the con and pro versus natural, gas versus oil versus all these different things, right? And so when you're ready to make that decision, you're like, okay, I feel like I now know what I should do, right? When you do that, studies show that 63% of the people you're nurturing are that weren't ready to buy are more likely to buy because now they trust you and that you've helped them understand things that they didn't understand before. And so nurturing is, and I'll say this is really important too. It's not just about the emails, right? It's not just about sending an email every 3 weeks or once a month. There has to be other communication. There has to be a phone call. Hey, Matt, it's been a couple months since we spoke. I'm calling back, how things are going. I know we talked about maybe trying to get started in Q2. Is that still good timing for you? I know you're not ready yet, but I just want to see if there's any more information you need. Having that verbal communication is critical, especially in the B2B, even the consumer world, right? I mean, you talked about the heating and plumbing guy. And so that's another part. And then we talked earlier about social media. A lot of B2B companies are underutilizing LinkedIn. If you connect with somebody and trying to sell them, send them an invite to connect on LinkedIn if you're not already connected. It's not a terrible idea, especially if you're posting content regularly on LinkedIn, because once you're connected, now they start seeing your name in the feed, right? So you have to use all the communication available. I even use text messaging. People are like, how can you text somebody? I'm like, well, if I already have a relationship with them and I have their cell phone number and they haven't gotten back to me for a voicemail I left or an email I left, and I knew there was going to be another step, another action I was waiting from them to get back to me on, I'll send them a quick text. Hey, Matt, just, following up, did you get the email I sent you last week? When can we chat? And I get a lot of responses via text. People are okay with that. They got their phone in their pocket, right? It's easy for them to communicate. And so the nurturing that is like I said, it's got to be strategic, right? I'm all about process, but it's got to be more than just email.
Yeah, really good points. Appreciate you
Yeah,
mentioning that. I do want to focus a little bit more on your story. So,
sure.
if we had a remote control and I could hit the rewind button and I went back to your teen years, so if I were to ask 13-year-old Jason, what do you want it to do? What do you want it to be? What kind of response would I have gotten in return?
Well, 13, you would have found me like kind of all geeked out. I was the only kid in my neighborhood with a workbench, I'll tell you that. Um, I love building things. I was, always into the arts. I was a huge fan of Legos growing up and all that stuff. And I did all the sports things a little bit, with friends, but really being creative was my sort of like my thing. I didn't even know what I wanted to do with that. Obviously I love drawing and all painting and all those things. So, um, what I what I if I know now, right? 13-year-old Jason didn't know like, oh, creativity isn't just drawing. Like you could be a chef, you could do all these different things and be creative. And so um I think looking back at it, I didn't know what I wanted to do, Matt. I mean, I didn't really honestly didn't know what I wanted to do until I got to college because I didn't know what those options were, quite honestly. I didn't even really know about graphic design in high school. I went to high school like in the early 90s, right? So, graphic design wasn't something they taught like they teach now in high school. So that was all, an exploration and an adventure for me to figure out my path. But it was definitely on the creative side for sure.
All right, so you're 13, you're focused on, creativity, building. I'm guessing
Yeah.
there's a lot of curiosity. You probably were very curious, right? What goes here? I believe you had mentioned Legos and all these different
Oh yeah,
elements
I
of
used to
building.
build and race car like RC race cars from scratch and build those. If you remember, like, and we're maybe about the same age, I don't know, but the model cars, right? So like
Sure.
you have the little pieces, you build the model cars, and you paint them, put all the decals on. Like I love those types of things. Just because I'm a detail oriented person, so it just kind of I gravitated towards those types of projects and activities.
Okay. And then how did that set you up for school then? So then we get to you're a little bit older as a teen, we're transitioning into the
Yeah.
college years. Where did you go from there?
So I love computers, right? I love growing, I grew up, with the Atari and ColecoVision and all those things that some audiences may not even know what I'm talking about, and that's okay. Um, and so when I got to college and I realized, oh wow, I could combine computers and art together, like that's pretty cool. And so that's how I got into the world of graphic design. And that's how I started in the industry, being a designer for, ad agencies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing this, and this is interesting because when we're talking about sales and we're talking about CRMs and we're talking about sales processes, it's almost like science and art coming together, right? Because there's elements, the science, the psychology, connecting with people, but there's also that art form, if you will, where there's a creative aspect. There's how to grab someone's attention, whether it's a marketing campaign or whatever the case may be. So, how much of what you learned from a science and art perspective came together with what you do now with CRMs and sales?
Oh, I mean, it's my one of my biggest differentiators, right? So all the competitors I'm up against, they don't have a marketing background. They haven't been a business owner, right? They might just be a techie who's built a piece of software or a salesperson trying to sell a piece of software. So it's been instrumental, in the way that I approach and I problem solve 1,000%. Um, but really the shift for me came from my curiosity, just like when I was 13 years old. And so the reason I sold my first business after having the agency for 16 years was because what we're talking about, there was no process. My clients didn't have a process. And so they'd be spending money on marketing. And I'm like, so how did it do? And they're like, well, what do you mean how did it do? Like, we got leads. I'm like, yeah, well, you got leads, but what were they qualified leads? Were they unqualified? Like, did they turn into a big client? How much revenue did it make? And it was just crickets, and that's still today. A lot of companies, it's just crickets when you ask them those questions. I was like, well, this is crazy. You're spending all this money on marketing and you don't even know if it's working, you know? Going back to your analogies, I wouldn't hire and tell my financial consultant, hey, here's 10 grand a month. I don't care if it ever makes any money. I'm just going to keep giving you 10 grand a month for the next 5 years, and if I lose, money every month, that's okay. No sane person would do that. But when it comes to marketing dollars, people are just like, well, this is the cost of doing business. It's just an item on the P&L, and this is our marketing budget. And a lot of times, that marketing budget is just pulled out of thin air, right? There's no rhyme or reason for how they determine that budget. And sometimes they're overpaying or they're not paying enough for marketing. And so if you're not tracking the ROI on that, you're just bleeding money. Like to the example before, the salesperson spending money on or time on all the data entry work, you're likely, just literally might as well just take that money to the backyard and throw it in a bonfire and burn it, because that's going to be probably more exciting than, a lot of these people that are spending the dollars of marketing and seeing no results.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How
I know I went off
long?
on a tangent there, but it's an important fact from
Yeah,
my
very important.
perspective of how I transitioned to be like, okay, this is a huge problem that someone needs to solve. And clearly I wasn't the only one solving it, but it got me excited. And that's why I made the shift.
Sure. So after college, how long after college did you start your marketing agency? You said you had it for 16 years?
Yeah, pretty quickly. So it was about 2 years. So I was freelancing at first for, different agencies, global ones, local ones. I wound up working for about a year and a half after that. Worked on the Virgin Atlantic campaign for North America, Johnny Walker, and a few other brands that were kind of cool. And then that was right when 2011, I'm sorry, yeah, 9/11 rather hit. And the agency I was at, we had a lot of travel clients. And so we went from like 65 people to me and like 14 people, including the two owners. I was like, well, this is probably not going to last very long. And so I was already freelancing on the side, doing design work for people I knew. I was like, well, maybe I could just turn this into a business. And I didn't know anything about running a business really, other than just some, hobby businesses when I did in, high school and college. And so that's how it started, is just like, okay, I'm living in Brooklyn with two guys, right? No wife, no kids, and the overhead is low. Let's see if we can make this work. And then it just built from there.
So was it harder than you thought?
What was harder was a little bit of ego getting in the way, and not realizing, like we talked before about, bringing in experts, people that are smarter than you. Not that, it never really occurred to me. And also the accessibility of information was a little bit different. We're talking about like 2000, end of 2002 is when I started. So it took me probably about 2, 3 years to hire a sales trainer, to hire a business coach, right? To hire all these people that had been doing it way longer than I had, that could teach me the proper way to do things. So I would say the hardest thing in that business is the roller coaster of cash flow, because in the agency world, most things are project driven. And so you got to be constantly hustling, trying to find new projects. And sometimes projects take a lot longer than expected. So then it's like, yeah, it's a $50,000 website, but if it's taking you 9 months to build it, maybe it's not so profitable, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so then you sell the agency. So you have this for 16 years, you sell it, and then how long from that moment to the business that you started now?
2018 is when I started Cultivice. Yeah.
Okay, 2018. So you mentioned that ego piece about not reaching out for good, solid mentorship. So clearly that changed with this business, right? Having people train you, teach you how to be even better, to offer even more value to your clients. Is there anything else that you feel is like a big learn for you when you started this other business?
Yeah. So, and this is something that I guess that's the question sometimes. I always have the same answer. Find a really good tax accountant, not just a CPA, but a tax accountant that knows what they're doing and has experience with your type of business. That made a huge shift for me. When I started, my father's like, "Oh, I'll just use my account." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds good." And the guy was fine. He was just like vanilla, wasn't doing anything special, but he wasn't also doing anything to really, advise me and to help me to make the business more financially sound. And so that is something that people, I think, often overlook the importance of, where they'll just handle their own tax return or use some free version or do it online. But it's totally worth having a good accountant and bookkeeper, to make sure that everything is in order and that you're getting, maximizing the best possible scenario you can, to make the most revenue and also reduce your tax implications, for that.
That's good advice. And I feel like that's good advice for where anyone is in business, right? If you're a smaller business, huge impact, like you're saying. If you're a medium-sized company, absolutely you need to make sure that you're up on tax policy in the state or states or even internationally. But even if it's a massive corporation, one of the things that is quite fascinating to me, even about like someone that's a CEO of a very large corporation, is some of the decisions that are being made where they're not taking into account whether it's like geopolitics or whether it's something very specific from a tax perspective that's taking place. And they're really taking a big gamble, right, with different positioning, different locations. So I feel like that advice, everyone could evaluate, okay, what's happening regarding taxes where they are. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. So Jason, thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate everything that you had mentioned. There's actually two things that I'm going to continue to process after this conversation's over. The first thing that you said, I know it sounds so simple, but it's something like I feel like everyone needs to take a step back and really evaluate, is just the definition that you threw out. You said there's three separate pictures. There's a database, there's sales activities, and then there's the communication. I feel like a lot of companies, they might have one or two of those pieces, but they don't have all three. That's something that everyone should focus on, me included. And then the second thing that you said that is a big challenge is that 15 minutes for follow-up. That's really stretching me here. I need to go back and try to figure out, okay, what can I do to speed up my follow-up with my clients. So I think we could all do a better job of that. So thank you so much for those points. Thank you for this conversation. If anyone wants to get more information on what you do, they want to reach out to you for your services, where's the best place they can go to get that information?
Sure. So whether you're driving on the treadmill, wherever you're listening to this, the best and easiest place to remember is afterthelead.com. You can connect with me on social. I got some really great ebooks and downloads there, a calculator to figure out the ROI of what your CRM should be. So really a lot of tools to help take you to the next step after this conversation.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'll include that in the show notes. People could just click and go from there. They can start playing around with the calculator that you mentioned. I really appreciate that. And again, thank you, Jason. Really, really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you found this discussion helpful, please leave a review, since positive reviews help others find these conversations. New episodes drop regularly, so stay tuned. And remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to take action, you must share more stories.